Hello, everyone. The sacred flame ignited when the rejected Omega walked past. Then the Alpha King saw the impossible. Evelyn Mercer had learned that the cruelest rejection was not being hated. It was watching someone who once knew every small thing about you behave as though you had never mattered at all. On the morning of the king's renewal ceremony, she stood beneath the servants' archway of silver pine, heaped with freshly pressed ceremonial linens against her chest, listening to bells announce the coming of Alpha King Nathaniel Cross. 2 years had passed since Harrison Vale rejected her before the pact because her wolf had never fully awakened. 2 years should have been enough to stop remembering the young man who once promised he would wait as long as she needed. It wasn't. If stories of courage, dignity, and unexpected destiny speak to you, subscribe and tap the notification bell. It helps our community grow. Now, back to Evelyn. Silverpine heap shimmered with preparation. Silver banners descended from high balconies. Winter roses perfumed the corridors, and servants moved quickly beneath the watchful eyes of nobles arriving for the ancient renewal ceremony. Somewhere beyond those crowded halls stood the moon's sanctuary and the sacred flame, a relic Evelyn had only glimpsed from afar. Women like her did not belong near sacred things. At least, that was what she had been taught. Those linens go to the sanctuary attendants, the steward told her. And keep them clean. Yes, sir. Evelyn turned toward the great hall and heard Harrison laugh. Her steps faltered before she could stop them. He stood beside Madison Whitmore, elegant in pale blue, greeting guests as though this morning belonged naturally to them. Harrison noticed Evelyn almost immediately. His smile vanished. Madison followed his gaze. Evelyn, she said pleasantly, I didn't realize lower household staff were allowed this close to the royal ceremony. I'm delivering linens. Of course. Madison's smile remained flawless. Everyone deserves somewhere they can be useful. A few nearby guests heard her. Evelyn felt their attention settle over her. Harrison said nothing. Then his gaze dropped to the linens, and without thinking, he reached toward the top cloth where one corner had folded beneath itself. Evelyn's breath caught. Years ago, Harrison had always straightened crooked things when she was nervous. Her shawl, a ribbon, the edge of a book in her hands. His fingers stopped inches from the fabric. He seemed to remember Madison beside him. Slowly, he withdrew his hand. Just don't cause trouble today, Evelyn. Something inside her hurt more from that unfinished gesture than from his words. She looked at the man who had once promised her patience and saw how carefully he had trained himself to become a stranger. I never did, she replied. Harrison's face tightened. Evelyn walked away before he could answer. At the service stairs, a crash echoed across the stone. An elderly kitchen maid had stumbled, scattering silver cups while servants hurried around her. Leave them, the woman insisted when Evelyn knelt. You'll be late. Then I'll be late. Evelyn checked her trembling wrist before gathering the cups one by one. Does this hurt? A little. Hold it close until the shaking stops. The maid studied her. You're Claire Mercer's niece, aren't you? The rejected girl. Evelyn's hand paused around the final cup. Yes. Regret crossed the woman's face. I'm sorry. Evelyn placed the cup on the tray. You don't need to be sorry for knowing what happened. By the time she stood, the steward was waiting, furious. The royal procession has closed the main corridor. Take the east servants' passage. Evelyn looked toward the narrow hallway disappearing beneath carved stone arches. She knew where it led, along the outer wall of the moon sanctuary. Sir, aren't servants forbidden near? You're not entering it. You're walking past it. Go. Evelyn lifted the linens and obeyed. The noise of the keep faded behind her as the passage narrowed. Through openings in the stone came the faint glow of the ancient chamber where kings had knelt and generations had prayed. Evelyn lowered her eyes. She wanted no attention from kings, priests, or sacred relics. She wanted only to finish her work without giving anyone another reason to whisper her name. Holding the linens. Closer, the rejected Omega walked toward the moon's sanctuary, never imagining that something inside it had been waiting far longer than she had been alive. The first sign that Alpha King Nathaniel Cross had arrived was not a trumpet or shouted announcement. It was the way Silverpine Keep became quiet. Conversations softened across the courtyard as royal guards entered in dark ceremonial coats, followed by the man every alpha in the Northern Territories was expected to obey. Nathaniel dismounted without assistance. At 31, He had learned that people watched kings differently from ordinary men. A pause became suspicion. A smile became favoritism. Silence became threat. So he offered the gathering none of those things. His steel-blue eyes moved across the assembled nobles, taking in bowed heads, ceremonial clothing, and the familiar performance of loyalty. Harrison Vale stood near his father with Madison Whitmore beside him. Harrison bowed correctly, though something had unsettled him. Nathaniel noticed the tension in his jaw before dismissing it as another private concern among Silverpine's ruling family. He had come for the renewal ceremony, not their domestic troubles. Your Majesty. Elias Grant waited at the Moon Sanctuary entrance in charcoal robes, silver-gray hair neatly combed despite the morning wind. Nathaniel clasped the older keeper's forearm. You look worried. I oversee an ancient flame surrounded by ambitious people. Worry is practically ceremonial dress. Nathaniel almost smiled. Still unchanged. Together they looked inside. At the sanctuary's center, a black stone brazier held a narrow silver-blue fire. Nathaniel had seen it at his coronation, during treaties, funerals, and every renewal ceremony since childhood. It had always looked exactly the same. Nearly 300 years without alteration, Elias said. No change in color, height, or response to anyone who approached it. And people still expect a miracle. People often need symbols longer than symbols need them. Nathaniel studied him. Elias normally defended tradition. Today he sounded as though he were warning Nathaniel about it. Before he could ask why, Reverend Caleb Monroe approached in austere, ceremonial robes. The Moon Council is honored by your presence, Your Majesty. It would be awkward to renew my authority without me. Caleb's smile barely moved. Today is about more than authority. The flame reminds every pack that sacred order survives individual weakness. Nathaniel's gaze cooled. He knew that language. Sacred order. Proper blood. Strength as proof of worth. Ideas polished by centuries until cruelty could masquerade as principle. A kingdom survives by how it treats people without power, Nathaniel replied. Not merely those who possess it. Caleb bowed. Of course. Elias watched him leave. You enjoy making priests uncomfortable. Only when they make everyone else uncomfortable first. Bells sounded from the courtyard. Attendants entered the sanctuary carrying incense and ceremonial vessels while guards secured the main approaches. Nathaniel removed his gloves. What aren't you telling me, Elias? The keeper's eyes moved toward the brazier. There are older records concerning the flame. Older than the official histories. Fragments. References. Several sections were removed long before either of us was born. Removed by whom? If I knew, I would have told you. Nathaniel heard truth in that answer, but not all of it. And what do those fragments say? Elias hesitated. Very little that can be proven. Only that there may have been a time when the flame did more than burn. Nathaniel glanced at the small silver-blue tongue. Today would be an inconvenient day for it to remember. Elias did not laugh. That troubled him more than the words themselves. Beyond the sanctuary wall, Evelyn knew nothing of kings, missing records, or worried historians. She moved through the East Servants' Passage with the ceremonial linens held carefully against her chest. Harrison's unfinished gesture still followed her, the hand that had almost straightened the folded corner, remembering an intimacy his mouth now denied. She pushed the thought away. Ahead, two sanctuary attendants crossed the passage carrying incense bowls. Wait, one whispered. The king is inside. Evelyn stepped back immediately, through the carved opening. Beside her, she caught only fragments of the chamber, polished stone, dark robes, and the distant silver-blue glow of the sacred flame. She lowered her gaze. A moment later the attendants passed. Evelyn adjusted the linens and continued forward, wanting only to deliver them and disappear. Inside the sanctuary, Nathaniel turned toward the servants' passage without knowing why. Evelyn had taken 3 steps beyond the carved opening when the sacred flame moved. She did not see it at first. She heard the room change. A priest stopped speaking mid-sentence. Metal struck stone as someone dropped a ceremonial cup. Then came a sound like dozens of people drawing the same startled breath. Evelyn turned. The narrow silver-blue fire inside the black brazier had bent sideways. Toward her, she looked behind herself. The passage was empty. No window stood open, and not a single hanging banner stirred. Still, every tongue of fire stretched in her direction, as if reaching for something it recognized. Nathaniel Cross forgot the servant corridor and stared at the brazier. In all the years he had stood before that relic, he had never seen it lean so much as an inch. Elias. The keeper did not answer. His face had gone strangely pale. Evelyn's stomach tightened. "I'm sorry," she whispered. She had no idea what she was apologizing for. Perhaps that was why the words came so easily. Then the flame erupted. White gold light surged toward the vaulted ceiling. Evelyn stumbled backward, clutching the linens as heat rolled through the sanctuary without smoke or burning anything around it. Gasps broke into frightened voices. One priest retreated from the altar. Another dropped to his knees. Evelyn could only stare. "What did I do?" she breathed. Reverend Caleb Monroe recovered first. "Remove her." Two attendants moved toward the passage. Evelyn instinctively stepped away. "I didn't touch it." "No one accused you of touching it," Caleb said. "Something has disturbed a sacred rite. Until we determine what, stop." Nathaniel's voice was quiet, but both attendants froze. He descended from the ceremonial platform, his attention moving from Evelyn to the impossible blaze. "Nobody touches her." Caleb turned sharply. "Your Majesty, caution requires knowing what happened before punishing whoever happens to be nearest." The words struck Evelyn harder than she expected. All her life, something had gone wrong, and someone had eventually found a way to make her deficiency part of the explanation. Nathaniel Cross did not even know her name, yet he had refused the easiest answer. Harrison's voice came from among the witnesses. "Her name is Evelyn Mercer." Nathaniel looked toward him. "You know her?" Harrison hesitated. Madison stood beside him, suddenly very still. "She was intended to be my mate." Evelyn wished he had stopped there. "I rejected her 2 years ago." Whispers spread. "Rejected." The word followed her everywhere, even into a room where fire had just changed color. Nathaniel's gaze returned to Evelyn. She held herself upright, but he noticed the way her fingers pressed into the folded cloth. "Why?" he asked Harrison. Harrison stiffened. "Her wolf never fully awakened. She has almost no scent." Caleb seized on the answer. "Then there may be something unnatural about her." Evelyn flinched. Nathaniel saw it. "Or," he said, "there may be something wrong with our assumptions." Caleb fell silent. Nathaniel faced Evelyn. "You walked past the opening when this began?" "Yes, Your Majesty. I was told to deliver these." "Did you touch the brazier, the altar, anything inside this chamber?" "No." "Then walk backward." Evelyn blinked. "Back? Only if you're willing." That mattered. She nodded and retraced her steps. The white gold blaze sank lower. A murmur passed through the witnesses. Nathaniel raised one hand. Silence returned. "Come forward again." Evelyn's pulse pounded against her throat. One step. Gold threaded through the silver-blue fire. A second. The flame rose. Evelyn stopped. "Keep going," Elias whispered, sounding less like a command than a man afraid of his own hope. She took the third step. Light flooded the sanctuary. Then Elias made a broken sound. Nathaniel followed his stare. Deep inside the white gold blaze, fire was gathering into a shape no draft or accident could create. The outline of a wolf enclosed by a burning crescent. For the first time that morning, the Alpha King's composure disappeared. "Elias." The old keeper stared at the symbol as though a dead language had suddenly spoken his name. Nathaniel stepped closer. "Tell me you've never seen that before." Elias swallowed. "I can't." "I have seen it before," Elias admitted. For several seconds, the only movement in the sanctuary came from the white gold fire behind him. Nathaniel's expression hardened. "Where?" Elias glanced toward the gathered witnesses, then at Reverend Caleb Monroe. "Not in front of everyone." Caleb stepped forward. "Anything revealed by the sacred flame falls under the authority of the Moon Council." "Not anymore." Nathaniel turned to Commander Luke Bennett. "Clear the sanctuary." Murmurs rose immediately. Luke and the royal guards began moving nobles toward the doors. Harrison lingered, staring at Evelyn as though the woman he had rejected had become someone he no longer knew how to measure. "Evelyn, you were told to leave," Nathaniel said. Harrison's jaw tightened. Madison touched his arm and guided him away. Caleb remained. "Your Majesty, removing the council from a sacred inquiry sets a dangerous precedent." Nathaniel met his pale eyes. "So does deciding the answer before asking the question." Caleb bowed stiffly and followed the others out. Evelyn stood alone beside the servants' passage, still holding the linens. "May I leave too?" Nathaniel turned toward her. Do you want to? The question caught her off guard. One had rarely mattered once someone with greater rank entered the room. Yes. She swallowed. But I think if I leave now, people will say I ran because I'm guilty. Nathaniel studied her for a moment. Then stay because you choose to. Not because they frightened you into it. Something tightened behind Evelyn's ribs. 2 years ago, Harrison had announced their rejection before asking what she wanted. This morning Caleb had ordered strangers to seize her before anyone knew what had happened. Nathaniel Cross had known her for minutes, yet twice he had left the decision with her. I'll stay. Elias approached the brazier. Its height had diminished, though white gold veins still moved through the silver-blue center. The crescent and wolf appear in a fragment preserved beneath the oldest royal archives. What does it mean? Nathaniel asked. The surviving text never says. Convenient. Infuriating, Elias corrected. Several pages before and after it were removed generations ago. Evelyn looked between them. What happened to whoever made the flame show that symbol? Elias hesitated. Accepted history says the line associated with those records ended more than 3 centuries ago. What line? Nathaniel asked. That is one of the missing answers. Evelyn stared at the fire. Maybe this has nothing to do with me. Nathaniel glanced at her. You believe that? I've spent years being told my body doesn't work the way it should. Believing an ancient sacred object suddenly cares about me would be a rather large adjustment. The corner of Elias's mouth almost moved, but Nathaniel heard what lay beneath her attempt at humor. Then we don't believe anything yet, he said. We observe. He asked Evelyn to move farther from the brazier. She did. With each step, the gold faded until the flame returned to its familiar color. Nathaniel's attention sharpened. Come closer again. Evelyn did not move. What if something happens to it? Then the responsibility is mine. She looked at him. You can't know that. I gave the instruction. That makes it mine. Evelyn went very still. No excuse. No condition. No suggestion that if something went wrong, her strange nature would somehow make her responsible. Nathaniel simply stood there, prepared to carry the consequence of his own decision. Slowly, she stepped forward. Gold appeared. Another step, and the fire climbed. On the third, the crescent began forming again. Elias whispered, Impossible. Nathaniel turned. Why? Before Elias could answer, the sanctuary doors opened. Caleb stood there with Harrison, Madison, and several Moon Council witnesses behind him. Your Majesty, the Council has invoked its right to investigate possible corruption of a royal relic. Evelyn felt the old instinct rise, to lower her eyes, apologize, disappear. This time she did none of those things. She set the ceremonial linens carefully on a stone bench and faced them. Nathaniel noticed. Something had changed. Caleb looked at Evelyn as though she were already guilty. Until this is resolved, she must submit to examination. Nathaniel stepped beside her, not in front of her. You may investigate what happened here, he said. But Evelyn Mercer is not evidence you own. The sacred flame rose behind them, casting gold across the chamber. For the first time since Harrison rejected her, Evelyn stood before people prepared to judge her, and did not feel entirely alone. Caleb's demand settled over the sanctuary like a sentence already passed. If Evelyn Mercer is not responsible for corrupting the flame, she should have nothing to fear from a controlled examination. Evelyn recognized the trap immediately. People had said similar things when her wolf failed to emerge. Submit. Prove yourself. Let strangers decide whether your body makes you worthy. Nathaniel's voice cut through the silence. She submits to nothing without consent. Caleb's mouth tightened. Then refusal will raise obvious questions. About your judgment, perhaps. Evelyn looked at the sacred flame. White gold still threaded through its center. She could walk away. Nathaniel had made that clear. But if she did, Caleb would turn her absence into confession, and every whisper that had followed her for 2 years would find a new reason to survive. I'll do it. Nathaniel turned to her. You don't owe them proof. I know. Evelyn set her shoulders. That's why this time the choice is mine. Elias positioned himself beside the brazier while Luke forced the council witnesses farther back. Caleb instructed Evelyn to repeat the path she had taken earlier. She approached. 1 step. Nothing. A second. The flame remained silver blue. By the third, whispers had begun. Evelyn continued until she stood near the altar. Still nothing. Relief flickered across Caleb's face. Harrison exhaled. Madison watched Evelyn with an unreadable expression. Again, Caleb ordered. Nathaniel's gaze sharpened. Ask her. Caleb paused. Will you repeat the test? Evelyn nodded. She walked back, then forward once more. Nothing changed. The silence felt worse than laughter. Perhaps, Madison said carefully. Everyone was frightened and mistook an ordinary flare for something meaningful. Caleb seized the opening. Or someone wanted it to appear meaningful. Evelyn felt the accusation settle across the room. Harrison stepped forward. Enough. For one foolish heartbeat, she thought he meant enough cruelty. Then he looked at her. Evelyn, stop doing this to yourself. Her chest tightened. Doing what? Trying to prove there must be some special explanation. His voice softened, almost becoming the man she remembered. That made it worse. Your wolf never came. I know how much that hurt you. But turning this into something it isn't will only humiliate you again. Evelyn stared at him. You think I caused this because I couldn't accept what you decided about me? I think you never accepted what happened to us. She almost answered with anger. Instead, she remembered his hand stopping above the folded linen that morning. The reflex of a man who remembered caring, followed by the choice to withdraw. I accepted your rejection, she said. What I stopped accepting today is your belief that rejecting me made you an authority on who I am. Harrison had no answer. A sudden crack interrupted them. Madison stepped backward and caught her palm against the broken edge of a silver ceremonial ornament. She gasped. Blood ran across her fingers. Harrison turned toward her, but Evelyn was already moving. Let me see. Madison recoiled. Why? Evelyn reached for a clean linen strip from the bench. Because you're bleeding. After the way I treated you? Evelyn met her eyes. That doesn't make your hand hurt less. She wrapped the cut and pressed Madison's fingers closed over the cloth. Keep pressure here. Madison stared at her, stripped of every graceful response she normally carried. Then warmth swept across Evelyn's back. Elias looked up first. His face changed. The sacred flame rose with a deep rushing sound. White gold light spilling across the sanctuary until every polished surface reflected it. Evelyn remained beside Madison. She had not approached the brazier, had not asked it for anything. Nathaniel looked from the failed test to Evelyn's hands protecting the woman who had humiliated her, and something clicked into place. It never answered the test, he said. Elias barely breathed. No, it answered her choice. Caleb went pale. Stop this examination. Nathaniel turned toward him. A moment ago you demanded it continue. You don't understand what this could mean. Elias stared into the white gold fire, then at Evelyn, with recognition slowly overtaking disbelief. Maybe he does. Caleb's fear deepened. Nathaniel saw it, and understood that the priest was no longer afraid of what Evelyn might have done. He was afraid of what she might prove. Elias stepped closer to the king. There is something in the old records you need to see. No one leaves with a copy of what happens next, Nathaniel said. Luke understood. Within minutes, the Moon Council witnesses had been escorted from the sanctuary, though Caleb protested until the doors closed behind him. Madison left more quietly, still holding Evelyn's linen around her injured palm. Before disappearing, she looked back once. This time there was no polished pity in her face. Only the discomfort of someone forced to remember who had shown kindness when kindness was least deserved. Elias led Nathaniel and Evelyn through a narrow door behind the altar into the keeper's archive. Dust softened the shelves, and locked cases filled the walls from floor to ceiling. Elias opened a small iron cabinet and removed a brittle piece of parchment protected between two sheets of glass. I found this 17 years ago hidden inside the binding of a ceremonial manuscript, he said. Nathaniel examined the faded writing. And you never reported it? I reported the damaged manuscript. Not this. Why? Elias met his eyes. Because someone had gone to considerable trouble to make certain it disappeared. Nathaniel's expression cooled. Read it. Elias translated slowly. Long before the modern pack hierarchy, the sacred flame had answered individuals called the Keepers of Mercy. They were described not as rulers or conquerors, but as healers, protectors, and mediators whose recognition came through acts performed without expectation of reward. Evelyn thought of the kitchen maid. Then Madison. That's why the test failed, she whispered. Elias nodded cautiously. It would explain the pattern. Nothing more. Nathaniel looked at the fragment again. Does it mention the crescent and wolf? No. That section is missing. Does it say the keepers were a bloodline? Not on this fragment. Evelyn appreciated the answer precisely because Elias did not pretend to know more. Then we still don't know why it reacted specifically to me. No, Nathaniel said. But we know what question to ask next. A knock came from the archive entrance. Luke appeared. Your Majesty, Claire Mercer is at the keep asking for Evelyn. Evelyn frowned. My aunt doesn't even know I'm here. She does now. One of the kitchen women sent a stable boy to the Mercer house after word spread that you were being questioned by the Moon Council. Evelyn immediately thought of the elderly maid she had helped. One kindness had traveled farther than she knew. Claire entered moments later, travel dust on her dark skirt, and fear plainly visible in her green eyes. She crossed the room without acknowledging rank and pulled Evelyn into her arms. Are you hurt? No. Claire held her shoulders and searched her face anyway. They said something happened with the sacred flame. It changed color. Claire's hands tightened. What color? White gold, Elias answered. The blood seemed to leave her face. Evelyn stared at her. You know something? Claire looked toward Nathaniel, then back at her niece. I know something your mother made me promise never to discuss unless this exact thing happened. Evelyn's heartbeat quickened. Claire's gaze dropped toward her collar. Evelyn instinctively covered the crescent-shaped birthmark beneath the fabric. When your mother was dying, she told me to keep that mark hidden, Claire said, especially inside any moon sanctuary. Why? Evelyn asked. She wouldn't tell me. I begged her. Claire's voice broke. She only said that if sacred fire ever recognized you, I was to take you away before the council understood what they were seeing. Evelyn stared at the woman who had raised her. For years, she had wondered whether her mother had hidden the mark because it was another defect to be ashamed of. Now the memory changed shape. She wasn't ashamed of me. Claire's eyes filled. Never. The single word nearly undid her. Evelyn looked away, fighting tears. Her mother had not left her an explanation. She had left protection, the only kind she could. Claire reached toward her, but stopped. Evelyn closed the distance herself and took her hand. A violent crash sounded from the sanctuary. Luke drew his sword. They rushed through the narrow doorway. The iron cabinet beside the altar had been forced open. Papers covered the floor, and a narrow panel in the sanctuary's eastern wall stood ajar. Elias crossed to the cabinet and froze. The oldest council ledger. Gone? Nathaniel asked. Elias nodded. Luke examined the open panel. Council passage. It runs behind the ceremonial chambers and rejoins the sanctuary near the western altar. Nathaniel's face hardened. Only someone with intimate knowledge of the Moon Council's private routes could have used it so quickly. Evelyn turned toward the main doors. Caleb was nowhere among the priests being held outside. Nathaniel understood at the same moment she did. He never left the sacred wing. Luke reached for the hidden passage. Nathaniel stopped him. Not alone. He looked at Elias, then at Claire and Evelyn. Her mother's warning had survived for years as a mystery. Now someone was willing to destroy history to keep it one. From somewhere beyond the stone wall came the faint scrape of metal, followed by the unmistakable smell of burning parchment. Nathaniel drew his sword. We're out of time. They emerged from the hidden passage near the western altar and found Caleb beside the sacred flame. The missing ledger lay open before him, and several torn pages were already curling black inside a ceremonial lamp. Step away from it, Nathaniel ordered. Caleb looked up, but his hand remained on another page. Luke drew his sword. Burn one more, and you'll lose the hand holding it. You think these records contain truth? Caleb asked. They contain chaos. Evelyn entered beside Claire and saw the fear her mother had carried for years standing before her in priestly robes. What did my mother know? Caleb's gaze settled on the crescent hidden beneath her collar. Enough to run. Claire gripped Evelyn's hand. Elias approached the altar. The keepers of mercy. Caleb's expression answered before his mouth did. Nathaniel saw it. They were a bloodline. Once. Caleb gave a bitter laugh. Healers. Mediators. Omegas more often than alphas. People without armies, titles, sometimes without proper shifts. And still the flame answered them. Evelyn stopped breathing. Why were they erased? Because pacts cannot survive if every servant believes kindness gives her authority over an alpha. Nathaniel's face hardened. That was never what the records said. It is what people would have believed. Caleb finally raised his voice. The old pacts were tearing themselves apart. My predecessors chose order. Elias stared at the burning pages. They chose themselves. Caleb's eyes flashed. Dominance created stability. And when the sacred flame contradicted that belief, Nathaniel said, "You silenced the flame by erasing the people it recognized." Claire began to cry. Evelyn's mother found part of the truth. Caleb looked at her. She found names the council had missed. Enough to realize her daughter belonged to the surviving Mercer branch. Evelyn touched the fabric over her birthmark. Years of shame rearranged themselves inside her. Her weak shift, her nearly absent scent, the whispered word broken. So there was never something wrong with me. Caleb's silence was crueler than an answer. Nathaniel moved toward her, but Evelyn shook her head. She needed to stand through this herself. "You knew girls like me might be different," she said. "And you let us believe we were less." Caleb tore another page free. Luke lunged. Caleb jerked backward and struck the tall ceremonial stand beside the altar. Metal shrieked overhead. An iron support holding the sanctuary lamps tore loose. Beneath it stood a young novice, frozen in terror. "Move!" Nathaniel shouted. Evelyn was already running. She shoved the child clear just as the beam fell. Nathaniel reached for her and caught nothing. White gold fire erupted from the brazier. It swept across the chamber in a blinding rush and wrapped around Evelyn. Claire screamed. The iron beam crashed against stone. Then silence. Evelyn opened her eyes. Fire circled her body without consuming her dress or scorching her skin. The fallen support lay inches away, glowing where the flame had turned it aside. The novice was alive. Evelyn's torn collar had slipped from her shoulder, exposing the crescent-shaped birthmark beneath her right collarbone. Elias slowly sank to one knee. The lost sign. The white gold fire rose behind Evelyn, forming a crescent around the unmistakable shape of a wolf. Then the flames lowered around her. Not dying, not weakening, bowing. Caleb stumbled backward. No, Nathaniel stared at the woman everyone had called spiritually empty, standing unharmed inside the oldest sacred power in his kingdom. He finally understood what Elias had meant by impossible. Evelyn looked down at her hands. Tears slipped across her face. "All those years," she whispered. "I thought the moon had forgotten me." Nathaniel moved to the edge of the fire. "Evelyn." She lifted her eyes. "You were never forgotten." The sanctuary doors opened behind them. Guards, nobles, servants, Harrison, Madison, and members of the Moon Council crowded the entrance, drawn by the crash. No one spoke. They saw the surviving novice, the burning pages, Caleb beside the stolen ledger, and Evelyn Mercer standing inside sacred fire that refused to harm her. Harrison's face collapsed beneath the weight of what he had once called defective. Madison slowly covered her bandaged hand. Nathaniel looked from them to Caleb, then toward the witnesses filling the doorway. The truth no longer belonged to a hidden archive. He stepped beside Evelyn as the white gold flame rose behind them. "No doors close now," he said. "Everyone stays. Everyone hears what was done." No one left. Nathaniel ordered the sanctuary doors closed, not to hide what had happened, but to make certain no one could later pretend they had not witnessed it. Evelyn stepped beyond the white gold circle as the sacred flame slowly returned to its brazier. Claire wrapped a shawl around her torn collar, though the crescent. Mark was no longer a secret worth protecting. Luke secured the surviving ledger and placed Caleb under guard. "Keeper Grant," Nathaniel said. "Read what remains." Elias opened the scorched volume carefully. His voice carried through the chamber. The Keepers of Mercy had served the old pacts as healers, mediators, and protectors. Many had been Omegas. Some possessed faint sense. Others shifted late or never completed a wolf form at all. Yet the sacred flame recognized them through acts freely chosen for another's good. Evelyn closed her eyes for one heartbeat. The words did not give her a new identity. They returned meaning to the woman she had always been. Elias continued. Later entries bore corrections in different ink. Keeper became attendant. Chosen became defective. Family names disappeared entirely. Near the damaged edge of one surviving page, Elias stopped. "There's another phrase here." Nathaniel looked toward him. "What does it say?" Elias traced the faded symbols without touching them. "Only part survives. Something about a divided flame. The rest is too damaged to translate." "Does it concern Evelyn?" Claire asked. Elias looked toward the brazier. "I don't know yet." Nathaniel did not press him. There were enough truths in the room without inventing another. He turned toward Caleb. How many generations were erased? Caleb said nothing. How many? I don't know. For the first time, the priest sounded old rather than powerful. The removals began centuries before my birth. And you protected them. Caleb lifted his chin. I protected stability. Nathaniel looked toward the young novice Evelyn had saved, still clinging to another priest's hand. A system that needs a child's rescuer called defective is not stability. He faced Luke. Reverend Monroe is suspended from the Moon Council pending judgment. Seal every council archive before another page disappears. Luke escorted Caleb away. No priest objected. Harrison remained near the back of the sanctuary. Eventually, he crossed the floor alone. Evelyn. She turned. His eyes dropped briefly toward the crescent at her collarbone. I was wrong. Evelyn waited. When your wolf didn't come, my father told me marrying you would weaken my claim to Silver Pine. People I respected repeated it until fear started sounding like wisdom. His voice roughened. I chose what they thought of me over what I knew about you. You did. Harrison swallowed. I'm sorry. Evelyn studied the man who had once promised to wait for her. Would you be saying this if the flame had stayed silver blue? He opened his mouth, then closed it. Evelyn nodded gently. That's the part you need to live with. Not for me. For whoever you become next. Harrison bowed his head and walked away. Madison approached after him. Evelyn's linen still wrapped around her palm. She started to remove it. Evelyn stopped her. Keep it until the bleeding closes. Madison's eyes brightened. You still care whether I'm hurt. Caring doesn't mean pretending you didn't hurt me. Madison absorbed that without defending herself. Then I'll remember both. She left quietly. Nathaniel waited until the room had thinned before approaching Evelyn. Tomorrow I begin a review of every law treating weak shifting or wolfless omegas as spiritually inferior. Because of me? Because those laws were built on evidence deliberately buried. You revealed the lie. That doesn't mean you owe the kingdom your life. Evelyn looked at him. And what happens to me? Nathaniel could have offered rank, protection, even a place beside the throne. Instead, he stepped back. For once, Evelyn Mercer, whatever comes next happens because you choose it. Something inside her softened. Evelyn crossed the distance he had given her and placed her hand in his. Nathaniel closed his fingers around hers only after she touched him first. Behind them, Elias inhaled sharply. The sacred flame had divided. Two slender white gold threads rose from the brazier, one bending toward Evelyn, the other toward Nathaniel. For a heartbeat, they reached toward their joined hands. Then both vanished. Evelyn turned toward Elias. He was staring at the damaged ledger. The divided flame, he whispered. What does it mean? Nathaniel asked. Elias slowly shook his head. I don't know. Not yet. Hours later, after Claire had fallen asleep and Silverpine Keep had grown quiet, Evelyn remained awake thinking about those two threads and the man who had offered her a future without telling her what it had to be. Near midnight, she returned alone to the moon sanctuary. The chamber should have been dark. Instead, the sacred flame was already burning white gold. Evelyn stopped beneath the moon sanctuary arch hours earlier. This room had been crowded with people deciding what she was. Now there was no council, no audience, no one waiting to judge whether she belonged. Only the black stone brazier, and a white gold flame that should have returned to silver blue. I thought I might find you here. Nathaniel's voice came softly from behind her. Evelyn turned. He had removed his ceremonial coat, and without guards or nobles surrounding him, he looked less like the Alpha King and more like the man who had repeatedly given her room to choose. Were you waiting for me? She asked. No, he glanced toward the flame. Apparently something else was. A small smile touched her mouth. That isn't unsettling at all. His quiet laugh eased the silence between them. Then he grew serious. Elias found something after you left. Evelyn looked toward him. The divided flame? Nathaniel nodded. The surviving ledger contained only those words. But Elias compared the damaged passage with the fragment he had 17 years ago. The fragment preserved the ending of the same rite. What did it say? That when the flame divided between a recognized keeper and another soul, it marked the possibility of a covenant. Evelyn's pulse quickened. A mate bond. Not the kind our pacts teach children to expect. No scent compelling obedience. No rank deciding who belongs to whom. Nathaniel held her gaze. The flame could reveal the possibility. It could not complete the bond unless both people freely chose it. Evelyn looked at the white gold fire. Once, Harrison's rejection had convinced her the moon had denied her something every Omega deserved. Now the oldest sacred power in the kingdom was doing the opposite. It was refusing to decide for her. All those years, she said, I waited for my wolf because I thought she would finally make me enough. Nathaniel remained silent. He understood that this truth belonged to Evelyn before it could belong to them. She touched the crescent beneath her collarbone. Then today I learned about the keepers, and for a while I thought maybe that was the answer. Maybe I wasn't worthless because I was secretly important. She shook her head. But that would still mean everyone was right to measure my worth by what made me unusual. Nathaniel stepped closer, leaving space between them. You stopped for an injured kitchen maid when no one important was watching. You helped Madison after she humiliated you. You ran beneath falling iron for a child whose name you didn't know. His voice softened. The flame did not make you worthy, Evelyn. It exposed how badly the rest of us had measured you. Tears gathered in her eyes, but she did not look away. And if I don't want a king? A faint smile touched Nathaniel's face. Then the king survives disappointment. And Nathaniel? The smile disappeared, leaving something more vulnerable. Nathaniel hopes you'll let him stay. Evelyn looked at his hand resting at his side. He did not offer it. Of course he didn't. From the moment the flame first moved, he had protected her without claiming her, questioned without defining her, and stepped back whenever the choice belonged to her. So Evelyn reached first. Her fingers slipped into his. Nathaniel closed his hand around hers. The sacred flame divided. Two white gold arcs rose from the brazier, one curving toward Evelyn, the other toward Nathaniel. Above their joined hands, they met and became one steady light. No prophecy thundered through the sanctuary. No invisible force pulled them together. Evelyn simply felt Nathaniel's hand around hers because she had placed hers there. She laughed through her tears. After everything, that seems almost quiet. Nathaniel smiled. Maybe the important things don't need to shout. By spring, Caleb faced judgment while Elias restored the names erased from the keeper histories. The laws condemning weak shifting and wolfless omegas were repealed. Harrison left Silverpine to discover whether leadership could be earned rather than inherited, while Madison began helping Claire at the village infirmary, learning that remorse mattered only when it changed what came next. Evelyn accepted recognition as the first publicly known keeper of mercy in 3 centuries, but no title that made her gift property of the crown. Months later, she crossed the moon sanctuary carrying medicine to an injured servant. The sacred flame brightened as she passed. Evelyn paused beneath the same arch where she had once lowered her eyes and hoped no one would notice her. Across the chamber, Nathaniel looked up. She met his gaze and smiled. Once, she had believed she was the Omega no one had chosen. Now she knew being chosen had never been the measure of her worth. The impossible was never that sacred fire could recognize a rejected woman. It was that a kingdom had needed a miracle to recognize the strength and gentleness. And Evelyn Mercer had carried that strength within her long before anyone thought to look.